Hey everybody, it is Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and this is exactly the video the title predicts. We are doing 32 separate and unique watercolor techniques today, live streaming, and you're going to leave this knowing how they're done, why they work, some pass-fail kind of issues with them, and all that basic stuff you need to know as a beginner. You're going to come away so informed. On the mic is my husband, John.
Hello.
He's going to make sure that oversized descriptor bars that let you know what technique we're doing are showing, or that the palette is showing for you so you can see the colors. I'm really going to break this down. I have notes. We've got orders. So if you see me like making sure that I'm organized, that's just so that when we timestamp this, you can see all 32 techniques chapter marked out and find the one you're looking for again really easily. And again, this isn't repeats. I was online and I saw so many like blogs that were like, so many techniques, and I was like, that's the same technique. That's the exact same technique. This is not going to be that. These are techniques and they will be separate from each other, and I had to edit some.
They are separated by markers.
I probably could have done 50. But John said 32 is all I get because he's like, that's like 2 minutes of technique. All right, are you guys ready to hop on in and learn a technique in watercolor?
Are you ready? You want a first one?
Oh, let me tell them that we're working on Fabriano 140-pound watercolor paper. The reason this is important for you to know is sometimes watercolor techniques work situationally, conditionally, like it wouldn't work the same on Bristol paper or copy paper from your copy machine. Watercolor paper, cold press, 140-pound Fabriano, that lets you know that the sizing is a particular quality and the paper is 100% cotton, and those things do affect your techniques, and I will let you know how those will change as we go through. All right, now I'm ready for wash.
You ready for a
step? Wash. Wash it. Wash. Okay, so our first technique is a wash, and what that basically is a solid wet color brought evenly across an area. So you would take a brush, a flat or a braid, generally, or a wash brush, and you would get them primed and wet. I'm just getting this wet in my water. I'm making sure that there's no color in the brush. And then I'm going to take this over and I'll grab some, let's get some phthalo blue. And I'm going to get an even amount of phthalo blue loaded into the brush. And then I want to make sure it's wet enough to do the whole thing. I'm going to come down. I'm not doing a drawdown. I'm not gradating. I am just applying a coat of color to the paper. That's one of the first techniques, and weirdly one of the most annoyingly hard techniques in watercolor is an even application of color. Look at us go. We did a wash.
That's pretty cool.
Now, what you can't see here because we have the palette showing and stuff showing is that I have a paper towel between my palette and my pad so I can check pigment on my brush and so I can offload water when necessary. And I will try to verbally let you guys know that that's happening so that you guys know what to do. How was that, John?
Really good.
Technique 1. Technique
1.
2. Because I like to give myself aggravation in life. I'm going to do something called a gradated wash. So that means it's going to be darker at the top or lighter at the bottom, or maybe darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. It doesn't really matter which way it goes, but it's going to go from a darker to lighter application. So I'm going to get my brush wet again, cleaned out of its paint. And let's do something really challenging like this transparent pyrrole orange. We're really going to load the pigment on here, right? So that at the top it's dark. You see that? And then I rinse out. Almost like a drawdown, but it's not because I'm actively coming down, making sure that there is less and less pigment as I'm going. So see how it's darker at the top and then it's blended down lighter to the bottom.
That's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. As much as anything in watercolor is pretty straightforward. I'm rinsing my brush out thoroughly to make sure I don't have hidden pigment in it, because you really want to watch for that. I have lots of water cups over here. I'm super prepared. So that was gradated wash. Now we're going to do draw down wash. And I'm going to switch to a round brush because I like a round brush for this.
Draw down.
I'm going to wet my brush. Wet it. Wet it. And I'm going to use a quill just so it's nice and heavy. And I'm going to come get a little bit of my quinacridone really, really loaded. And come up at the top and just do a heavy, heavy amount of quinacridone right across the top. Lots of pigment in it. And we'll rinse out thoroughly. It's hard to get pigment out of these big, heavy brushes, but I'm gonna. And now I'm coming back with it just wet with water. Right, I'm gonna come across, and then I'm gonna do a thing. I'm gonna touch across the color. And I'm gonna continue to pull down. And what will happen, especially over time, is the top will blend down into the watercolor down here. See how it softens that edge and it draws it down? So you see that a lot in skies where, you know, you're coming in and their sky has a drawdown. You can get it to draw down a little better. All right, there you go. You can see it going now. So it's drawing down into the water below. A lot of skies, a lot of different things have that process. Let me get a paper towel to clean up my little moving palette because I did so many wet techniques at the beginning, like you do. Paint management, as in all things. I'm just cleaning up so that when I go to do other little things, I normally work over in my big palette here, but today I wanted some mobility. All right. We're doing pretty good. We're 3 in. Now we're going to do, this is really interesting. This is wet into wet. Everybody loves wet into wet a lot. I love wet into wet a lot. And that basically means that the paper is wet and I'm painting into the wet. So I'm going to get clean water. Clean water. And I'm going to paint all the water right on the paper. Now, it should be damp enough to be shiny, but not puddling. Right? You're not trying to puddle it. And I'm going to get some of my orange. And you're going to see there that the watercolor diffuses, right, and goes around the paper. Let's get some nickel Aussie yellow. It's just a fun color I really like. Just painting wet colors into here. And you see as they blend, they soften, and they change.
That's pretty cool.
Wet into wet. So the water is allowing the paint to blend in. And another thing that's happening that you don't necessarily always see in your paper when it's wet is that the paper is also pulling the pigment into it. And that action as it dries softens everything too. So how it looks here is very different than how it's going to look when it's completely dry. And we put
Now,
it wet into wet.
do all watercolor paints follow the water as demonstrated?
So all watercolor paints do follow the water, but they have different temperaments. So there are 2 types of watercolor personalities. One is tight, and that means that the watercolor does soften, it does diffuse, but it stays still pretty close to where you put the brush mark down. And then there's those that bloom or flow, and those have an agent in them that causes an excessive diffusing. Something like core synthetic oxgall or natural oxgall is actually in the paint, and that causes the diffusing. If you want to take watercolors that are not traveling for you well, you can add this to your water and get the same effect. So tips and tips.
Seems reasonable.
Okay. Water onto wet. Oh, it's a challenging one now. So I'm going to take an area and I'm going to paint it. As
Is
you
this
do.
going to be wet into wet?
Water into wet.
Water into wet. Okay, let's do this. Ooh, look.
Water on wet.
Water
Why
on
is
wet.
that a thing? Well, because when you put water on an area that is already painted, there is sort of a pushing effect. It's a little similar to, say, what you might see with the rubbing alcohol that we're going to be doing later, but it's still a little different. So I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to just drop water. See how it pushes it?
Mm.
That's water into wet. It pushes the pigment over. And something that helps this, if the paint is granular, like ultramarine is granular, it will do this very well. And also, if you have good sizing on your paper where the paint doesn't just immediately pull into the paper, it will do this very well. But you can see it creates some diffused little techniques. Can we see this overhead?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little hard to view from the side. So can you see that right there, how that is? That is that technique. Oh, we're doing so good. I'm going to need fresh water soon.
All right, we can do that.
I think I've got one here. Okay. We're going to be going through water like crazy. That's another clue. Change your water often. Change water often, especially if you're changing colors or doing a lot of this stuff often. Now, this is wet onto dry. And we've talked about this before. This is another application of the paint goes where the water is. So if I want to paint something, I can load up my brush. I'm going to load up my brush with the little Payne's Gray over here. And whereas in other things, you saw the paint just kind of going all different kinds of places, this is just staying where I put it. Just a nice little gray cat. Doing little gray cat stuff. Right? And the paint isn't traveling all over my paper. The branch isn't flowing over into the cat. Right? Just staying where it is. If I want to like deepen the edge out here, I can do that. And what you'll notice is that I get diffusing where it's wet inside the cat. See that there?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to leave the confines of where the paper is wet. So that lets me really control a lot of stuff, you know, in my paper. And understanding about how it travels when it's wet and how it travels when it's dry is a big foundational part of having more success in your watercolor. How are we doing? We're almost through our first sheet.
Ooh,
I feel kind of proud of us.
that's pretty good.
All right, so we did water on a wet, wet on a dry. Oh my goodness, we're going to get to do erasing and removing. So sometimes, sadly, in life, in watercolor, I'll get one of my erasing little sponges, right? You have a boo-boo, and I'm going to make a boo-boo. I'm going to get some of my ultramarine blue, and I'm going to go, oh no, I have a boo-boo, right? So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to wet this area, and I'm going to tap up. I know it's weird to have a blank square, but knowing how to pick up your watercolor is very important, you know. So that technique goes into other things, like you can control that technique and remove glazes and create sky effects and everything, but just knowing how to pick it up. Let's do it again, just so that we see it and we know how it's done. I'm going to make a little boo-boo here with my blue paint, and I'm going to get clean water. I'm going to dilute and I'm going to tap up. Get a little splatter where you don't expect it to be. If you're using good paper that has a good sizing on it, it's why I recommend the Fabriano. I'm not, this isn't a sponsor video, though they do send me paper, mostly because I really love the paper. I also buy paper, just bought a bunch of paper, so it's kind of a half and half. That way you at home know my relationship to the company. But that's what I like. I like how I can pull that up. So that is actually going to be our blank page to be doing, because that's how you remove that. See, John had to run out and take care of a quick thing, and I don't hear him back. So it's live. I'm going to try to find you guys on YouTube. I suppose I could remove it again. He'll be back in a second. I'm sorry. Something was afoot. Sometimes that happens. You're in a house and you've got to go take care of things, and I'll just keep doing this, and you guys can see that it works. Works. That's how you pick up watercolor. Are you back? Okay. Next square, we're on to the next technique. So good. All right. Erasing and removing, and now we're going to do some blending. So I'm going to be right here in this square, and I'm going to take, let's say some yellow. Let's paint some yellow out. Let's paint some pink out. So the first blending happens in that drawdown method, right? Where you see the wet touching the wet. That is one way of blending. Right? But it's blended a little bit. It's certainly softened, but it's not maybe blended the way we like to think of when we think of something blending. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a brush. I like to use a Brate. I'm going to get damp and kind of wipe off the extra water. I'm going to come here and actually diffuse these two colors into each other. Those of you who have struggled blending your acrylic, I'm going to rinse out. We'll be like, wait, what? Yeah. It's sometimes a little easier to do this with the watercolor. So you can see I'm just picking up and I'm diffusing. I'll take the extra pigment off.
Is this glazing or blending?
Blending.
Oh, okay. We had the wrong. There. Blending.
You know what? I did reverse it. I did.
Okay.
I needed to glaze and I blended.
That's okay. I just got the right graphic up. Because I was like, that doesn't look like glazing. That looks like blending.
All right. Well, we'll switch those numbers.
Yeah, that's okay.
This is the blending. So sorry. Was not glazing. This was blending. I didn't see the graphic go up. I was a little flishmeckle from John running out, and so I didn't notice it. But this is blending. Blending.
That's good.
Blending. Now so what we've done so far is a wash, gradated wash, draw down, wet into wet, water on wet paint, wet onto dry, erasing, and blending. That's where we're at right now.
So
sorry about the wrong graphic.
I think I put the wrong graphic up.
Oh, I'm sure you didn't. You were always on top of it. I need to put this to the side. I'm going to let it continue to dry a little bit and grab my next. Make sure I have the right order here. Yes. Okay. So the next one we're going to do is
glazing. Because we skipped it. I mean,
we skipped it.
I did it wrong.
I'm sure you did. He's amazing. Just amazing. So we're going to go over glazing. I'm going to get my quinacridone gold. And I'll get a little bit of that onto my brush. And the first part of this is, my hairdryer is a little far from me.
I can fix that.
I think it got moved.
Oh, your palette. You have to move your palette. Your left palette.
What?
There you go. Perfect. Nope.
No, we're not going to keep it there the whole time.
No, your hand.
Oh, sorry. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. All right. I need my hairdryer.
Okay.
which is far, far from me.
Oops.
And that's just to accelerate this drying. Normally, I don't like to use a hairdryer and accelerant to dry watercolor, but for this instance, for this video, I think it's okay. I'm going to come here and dry it real quick, and then I'm going to show you how you glaze.
All right, so this shouldn't take too long. She's just going to give it a quick dry, and then we'll be right back. And I think in order to get the glaze to work, you have to have the layer dry, because otherwise it's a wet blend. So glaze implies that it's going to put something on top of the next layer that is semi-transparent, whereas blending makes them mix together. But you knew that. I just needed something to say while we're doing this. So I'm just, saying stuff to say stuff at this point. I probably should say, hello, everybody. And look, she's back. Okay.
So the principle of glazing is that watercolors are pretty transparent, and while you can reactivate them at any point, even when it's dry on the paper, you can get them to move again or flow or bloom by adding water and reactivating them. If you come through and not agitate the surface too much, you can glaze a color over on top, kind of like cellophane layering on top of each other. So I guess I will do some green and a little nickel azo yellow together, and I'm going to load it on my brush. I'm going to show you, come along, you make a nice little line. My paper is dry, so this is working. All right, so we have those little lines. That's going to help me later. I'm going to get a little bit more of my yellow, and I'm going to kind of touch out, press, and pull. This is a basic leaf stroke, so this is a technique within a technique.
A nested skill.
It's a nested skill. Yes. And an important nested skill. You can do these with daggers and angles and rounds. I think the trick to having a lot of fun with it is to sometimes change up colors maybe a little bit within the leaves. I'm going to get into my quinacridone. Oh, sorry. I get over there, don't I? And you just said something to me.
It happens.
All right. Can you guys see that there? And if I wanted to, I could come in with some yellow, just some yellow. Look at that. That's a glaze. Glaze. Now you can glaze. This works for, if you had this be yellow and then you put blue over it, it would look green. And if you had this yellow and you put red over it, would look orange. So basic color principles work on a glaze as well. You guys loving it?
I do.
You guys loving it? All right, I'm very proud of this. Okay, so then we did glazing. Oh boy, one of my favorites. We're going to dry brush. You guys ready to dry brush? So dry brush is not a completely dry brush. Your brush is, especially in watercolor, is mildly damp because you still have to be able to pick up the watercolor, and you're not going to get a lot of wet pigment on it. You're going to bring it over to the paper, and as you can see, light pressure. If you think about this, this is actually used quite a lot in master work. We did a watercolor based on Sargent, and I was amazed at how much dry brushing is involved in that. You can change colors out. You can rinse out and then get another color. And this is dry brushing. Good for fur, good for textures, good for all kinds of natural elements in your painting process.
Ooh.
See, told you. Different techniques, 32 of them. You feel like your learning brain is quirking today? All right, what do we got going on? All right, so we did dry brush, sponge. I love sponge. I love sponge. So you can, and I'm going to do half of the paper wet and half of the paper dry so you can really see that. And I'm going to take a sea sponge. sea sponge, sea sponge, sea sponge. And I'm going to get it slightly damp, right? So I wet it and wring out the extra. I don't want even drops of water coming out.
Squidward loves when you do that.
And I'm going to sponge into the wet and into the dry so you can see the two effects against each other.
Ooh.
Wonderful technique, and these make fantastic clouds. They do. They make terrific clouds. I'm going to add a crazy amount of pink over there, I think, just because I want to be bizarre about it. Look at that. I want it to be pretty. Hard edges, soft edges. You're kind of getting the watercolor thing now. Sometimes looking at the techniques of a medium tell you a lot about its nature and its personality and what it's kind of inclined to do and not inclined to do. Oh my goodness. Hi, Michael and Kim and Heather. It's so good to see you guys. I love seeing everybody. I hope you're great on Facebook. I hope you're great on YouTube. Wherever you're watching from, be sure and bookmark this. If you're on Facebook, you may want to also grab the YouTube one because it's sometimes easier on the replay for reviewing. But everything is up for reviewing. Oh my goodness. Mr. On Watercolor. Here we go. I'm going to come here and I'm going to grab, let's grab a little bit of ultramarine blue. This is another way that we use water to impact our watercolor. Now, I don't want this to go everywhere, so I am going to create a little shield. By the way, they can sell hydrous watercolor to you. So if you want to get even more involved in this, you can spray watercolor onto watercolor. See how that causes that to soften? Now, if I go through, I'm going to artificially kind of dry it. Right. I'm going to artificially dry it. I just want you to see the couple things that this does. And I'm going to take my hairdryer here.
Just a little dry there.
And I'm going to glaze. See, we're layering techniques. I just want you to understand why I'm showing you this one. I lost my sponge and my puff ball.
Oh no, do you need replacement?
Hmm?
Do you need replacement? Do I need to find them for you?
I think I've got an extra roll of paper towel. I'm going to dry this too.
Okay. Give that a quick dry. I don't think she's using as much. Oh, no, there goes the, you see that the air moves it over the surface, makes it kind of go shh. So I think she just needs to get it dry so you can see the effect when the water hits it, the mister effect. Mister? It's a mister. Anyway, again, just there.
Okay, so this is dry.
It's dry.
It's dry. Now, sometimes when you're painting, you will have hard edges or something that you want to soften. If you come through and wet it again, it will soften again.
Oh.
So that's why that technique is important. So say you did something and you're like, man, that looks really hard. You can just lightly mist it and those edges will diffuse.
Gotcha.
It's just good to know that that's a thing you can do. All right. I see lots of love going on in the chat today. Are you guys loving this? We're like going through the courses. So, oh, this is a fun one. Touch wet into wet. While I am over here, John, painting the touch wet into wet, can I get 3 fresh waters?
I think so.
Or 2 fresh waters?
We'll see what we can do.
Now, I am going to take some of my quinacridone magenta. I'm going to come right here. And I'm going to paint a little fishy. Right, a little red fishy. Paint his little, give a little tail swish. Yeah. All right. And so we have this. I don't want my head to dry. I need my head to stay wet for this to work. And little fins coming back and a little fishy. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my Azo yellow and come here as well. Now let's get our little fishies to kiss. Well, they don't want to kiss today. All right, I'm going to go blue. There we go. So where those two, do a little fin there. Okay, well, that did better there where the tail touched the tail. I'll do some adjoining water bubbles as well so you can kind of see it. So I'm going to make a little circle here. Now I'm going to make another little circle right here.
Is watercolor okay for house pipes?
Like all art materials, you've got to be kind of thoughtful about reading the labels, because while most watercolor is completely fine for pets, there are some pigments.
Pipes.
Oh,
in your house.
Yes, pipes. Pipes, yes. Pets, read ahead. I'm going to make some purple here. I'm just taking my ultramarine and my quinacridone. I'll come right here. Oh, and you can kind of see it happening there too between the two. When you touch two dry objects and you let them touch each other, you can get kind of like this little blending. See what's happening there as it travels through? Yes, Lily. Lily asked that. Is watercolor okay for house pipes? Yeah, it really, for the most part, watercolor isn't a problem for the environment. For the most part, watercolor travels really well. For the most part, watercolor doesn't damage anything. Obviously, cadmium pigments, there are certain pigments that are not good to ingest or let your pets eat or, drink. just know inside your body. But those are labeled on the tubes, and like acrylic or oil, those are coated pigments. They're not just bioavailable through your skin. So it's just about being situationally aware on that. All right, we did touching. I'm actually kind of happy with that. Yeah, I did demo it. I was a little worried for a second. Then I was like, no, it demoed. It demoed great. Okay. So we did touch wet to wet edge. Ooh, Q-tips. Q-tips. Well, first, I'm going to give myself a little something to start with. So I'm going to take a little bit of my quinacridone gold and my phthalo green, and I'm going to give myself a couple little down vines. Because you can't have wisteria without a little bit of green hanging leaves, right? I just want to give it some context. All right, so we've got some nice little leaves coming up. Now, Q-tips. You can paint with Q-tips just like you do with acrylic. I will try to get that out of the way. I'd have that over there so I could be close to that. First, you get your Q-tips wet. That's one of the differences that you would have. And I'm going to load up into some, let's say, quinacridone pink. And you just tap up and down. These are regular cotton swabs, right? Bundled together. I'm getting into some ultramarine blue. And I'm just tapping up and down. And just like in acrylic, look at that. They can make you a gorgeous little flower. Grab some phthalo blue. You can even come back when it's dry. I'll dry it artificially right now and then show you what I mean.
Just give it a little quick dry here. Wow. So, there she goes. Every time I start to think of something to say, you're done.
I'm done. It's just got to be a little bit dry. I'm going to get fresh Q-tips because there was a lot of pigment on the other ones. I'm going to go back into my quinacridone. So you can still work out shapes and details even after you have the diffused. So there's a lot of control that you have with the Q-tips. Not for nothing. Q-tips. It's a technique and you can use it. You should use all the techniques. What are we doing after Q-tips? Pouncers. Yes. I love pouncers. I'm going to make half my paper wet and half my paper dry so you can see the difference. So pouncers are little foam objects that are circular that you can use. I save pouncers from battery packs where I pull the inserts out of the battery pack. I made pouncers in my brush line. I don't know how many are available still out there. But there's pouncer, March Stewart, everybody makes a pouncer. So there's pouncers out there to be had. All right, so I'm going to take a pouncer. It's a little sponge pouncer. And I'm going to go ahead and get it wet. Not soaked, but wet. And I'm going to come here and twist right into my paint. I'm going to come here and do half and half. That's what it looks like into the wet. This is what it looks like into the dry. Get some green. So that same bokeh technique that we do over in the acrylic channel, yes, we can do over on the watercolor channel. The difference is if I leave the watercolor paint on my sponge, it doesn't ruin the sponge. Sponge is still okay. So I don't have to have some big panic about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my sponge? How are you guys doing? We're like whipping through these. All right, so we did pouncer, saran wrap. I love saran wrap. I've got some saran wrap all ready to go. Let's wet out an area, and then we're going to show you how this works. This is really nice for, let's get some quinacridone gold out, and maybe some, Payne's gray, burnt umber, transparent pyro orange. I'm just trying to pick some fun colors for what we're doing, a little blue. All right, so it's all wet. The whole thing is wet. I'm going to crumple up some saran wrap. Crumple, crumple, crumple. Now, in this, two ways that you do this. You can pull up now, or you can allow and dry. I like where you let it dry. This works in acrylic and in watercolor. I like where you let it dry. So let's come back and visit that a little later. John, don't let me forget we're going to reveal.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Okay. I just got to remember to reveal. I'm going to move this over. Man, I'm just techniques on techniques, right? Have the saran wrap kind of off to the side. So after saran wrap, oh boy, alcohol drops. The best one. So there's a 1-minute tip video right now on the YouTube channel under the short shelf. Please, if you're here watching on my watercolor channel, check out the short shelf, watch all the videos. Tell me what you think, because those are great ways to give you guys 1-minute tips. All right. So salt. Super fun, super fun.
Alcohol.
Oh, alcohol. Thank you. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can use the kind of alcohol you drink, but you really got to get into Everclear for it to work. 91% isopropyl alcohol is my favorite one to have in the studio because it works with both acrylic and watercolor equally well. I like to take it and put it into a water brush. So these are empty brushes that you can put water in. But in this particular instance, I'm going to just put rubbing alcohol in. And let's paint out. Oops. Well, we know how to erase. That's at least something. You want it to be wet. Doesn't work as well on dry. So to really see the effect, to get the results, you really, really, really want the paper to be wet. It also helps if it's darkly pigmented, if that makes sense. You can apply this with drops. You can apply this with a brush. You can apply this with splatter. I'm going to just drop a little bit down my brush. There you go. Little different than the water. I think there's nice treaties in the kitchen. There's chicken treaties, which would work. All right. So there we go. Let's look at that overhead because it's real pretty overhead. So you get some really nice effects. Now, in the water, it's real easy to go back over the area and glaze or do other techniques. The alcohol does tend to make other techniques a little more challenging, just in its nature. So it's one to think about, like on your end result, like what do you want your end result to be? I'm going to pick up a little extra with my paper towel just so it's not so wet. I like it this wet. I genuinely do, because then it will really like dry and drop pigment into the paper. But for the purposes of doing so many techniques, I'm kind of changing it out. Paper towel clouds. I'm going to get another paper towel. This is the Easy Clouds. Works with sponge as well. I'm going to get clean water. Clean water. And I'll put out a little more of my phthalo blue. How many more? Where's my big tube of phthalo blue? I'll just put out my little tube of phthalo blue. I have a big tube somewhere, but I'm going to put out my little tube. Okay, so that's a nice little amount of phthalo blue. All right, I've got clean brush, no pigment on it. I've checked and come across and kind of wet my paper. I'm going to really load up my phthalo blue. Look, it's doing a drawdown. It's pretty good. Doesn't really look like a sky yet, though, does it? But if I take my paper towel, crumpled up, into a little ball, I can create little clouds. See, sponge does it too. Check that out. Paper towel clouds. You've just been having trouble with your clouds. Sometimes it's a good way to get it. If you need to soften it, remember you can come back and mist it later. Techniques layer. Techniques layer, right? That's important to know. Techniques layer. All right, so we got paper towel clouds.
Artist
knife. So I too can paint with an artist knife. I'm going to grab, let's go a little bit green. And go green and yellow, I think. Always fun. Maybe a little bit of brown in here just as an interesting color. So I brushed that out, but I want some like different kind of edges and everything on it. So first, I'm going to take my artist knife and I might come here and just get a little paint on it, little bead. And I can work that right into the wet. Look at that. Scrape. Fantastic for abstract techniques. I can even scrape the paint and it pushes back. Now, I'm sure you guessed, I'm going to dry this.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you over dry.
All right. Take that quick dry. Now, thank you guys. If you're enjoying this, don't forget to tickle that subscribe button and flick the bell so that you get notifications.
Well, I could, right?
You could.
I could come back. Let's get a little bit of our blue. And I can come right over the dry and get hard edges.
Ooh.
Okay, so you can get both of those effects into the watercolor. Very nice for abstract work. And get the knife wet and then also use it like a brush. Isn't that wild?
That is crazy.
So you gotta just realize you can dip it in alcohol and do weird stuff with it. Just endless. Endless, 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 endless. We're learning the techniques. So we did artist knife. Oh boy, this is a very good one. Salt. This one we're going to have to wait a second and answer the big questions up front. Should your paper be dry when you remove it? Yes. Yes, you definitely want your paper to be dry when you remove it. I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine blue and my quinacridone magenta, and I'm going to put out some lovely purples and magentas. I want it to be wet. Doesn't work on dry paint. The paint has to be wet. And this can give you a snowflake, kind of distant effects, rain, all kinds of natural abstract effects. And you see, you just put the salt on there. And what happens is, as the paint dries, it's already pulling it in. It pulls the paint in, and then there'll be little spots that are white around the paint, and we can look back at that later when it's dry.
Yeah.
Oh, looks like the watercolor saran wrap is ready to reveal. You ready?
Are you?
Look at that. That was the saran wrap.
Ooh.
So that's the end result of that. So we're going to let that dry, and you can already see how it's it's flaking and starring it out and really showing you there. The other one that's like this, it's real good. And I'm going to kind of get this wet, and I'm going to put gray on, and then I'm going to change my water. Or maybe I'll do gray and blue since they're next to each other right here. By the way, that's Core Watercolor Payne's Gray. It's like my favorite for that particular effect you just saw there, the super bloom. But you can take, just like you can take rice to save your electronics when they get wet, you can put rice into your watercolors and you can see the capillary effect. Now, how is rice different than the salt? The salt tends to leave a bit of residue and be impactful to the paper, whereas the rice really just comes off with no issue, doesn't affect the pH of the paper or cause any problems. And what you'll basically get is the little white areas and then the little areas where it clumps the pigment around it. And again, we'll look at that after. We've been going a while. You can see that the salt is having a little moment. I'm going to rinse my brush out and switch to another water. I think I'm going to need 2 waters soon. Oh my goodness. We just go through water on this. So we did rice. Ooh, straw. So for straw, right? There it is. There's my pen. I'm going to start out with a little bit of a drawing, even though we're going to later demo this again, because I think if you have any kids, and I know I have people who are painting with me who have kids, this is one you're going to want to do. So first, I'm going to make a U with a waterproof pen. And then I'm going to make an eye and an eye by making a big circle and a smaller circle. Out from the eye, I'm going to make an upside down little 6 and an inward little 6 to create an ear. A little U for nose. Little tongue. 2 little parallel lines come down for neck. I'm going to give a little bit of kind of an iris in there. And let's sort of color in let our mouth so we look properly freaked out. Shall we?
Mm-hmm.
Properly freaked out. This particular technique requires a straw and a sense of humor. I am going to maybe put a paper towel at the top and around just in case the straw gets away from me. which it might. It's been known to in the past. So I'm making just a little bit of a mess guard. And I'm going to pick some colors. I'm going to go, let's get some red. I'm really wet. My brush is really wet. I'm really loaded on the paint. And I want to make sure that there's a lot of water. Rinse out. Get some orange. Real wet. And look, it's doing that touch technique that it does, right? Where if it touches, it blooms. Again, real wet. I don't know if I'm going to get all the way to purple, but I'll at least get to blue. Now, this does all kinds of wonderful things, including cherry branches and fish and birds and all. And I have full videos on this, but straw technique. And look at us. We made it fun. You got to be proud of us, right?
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Ooh, drip is next. All right. I'm going to make a very wet blue blob. Very wet. And then let's make a very wet yellow blob. Let them touch because they want to.
Ooh.
Maybe a little pink. But also, I'm going to tilt my paper and allow things to run off and make their own way.
Oh. Make them drip.
They make a drip.
That's pretty cool.
And you'll notice that the colors all run together. So, like, if you ever see it where it's like the eyes are crying so meaningfully.
Oh.
Drip technique. Little tip, though. Sometimes you need to control the drip. I'm going to do one of these here. I'm going to tell my paint where it's dripping. I dripped, but I was very controlling in my drip, if that sounds okay. And sometimes you can accelerate it. I'm going to run the hairdryer.
Okay. Oh, see, it just blows it right on down.
Use the hairdryer, much like the straw, to push your drips. So there's lots of ways to do that. Watercolor splatter on wet. Let's put out some more guards. Right, because we got a guard.
Against the splatter.
Against the splatter. And the reason I separated these up into two techniques, they are separate because they impact on the art differently.
Ooh.
That's why. Well, I'm going to wet this. I'm sorry if I'm missing questions. I'm just like whipping through.
Well, that's okay. We're getting through these. We'll catch all these questions on Facebooks.
On Facebooks?
Or in the description comments below.
Oh, that's a good place to put it. I've taken a toothbrush and I've gotten it wet and I've added some paint to it. And now I'm going to flick back. So you see it just splatters and diffuses.
It does.
Very specifically and unexpectedly does some really special stuff. Load it up. It's real pretty. I don't know if we can see it from the side better or overhead better. I definitely am going to need some new water.
Huh.
All right. And you can see this is still going a little bit, but You can see how it pulled the color in. You can see on the salt what it's doing, creating those little stars, those little star patterns. All right. We'll let this continue to dry. Oh my goodness, we're into the last 8. What? Too amazing. Now, we're going to be doing some more splatters because we're going to watercolor splat on dry because that looks very, very different and it's used all the time. You know, every time we do a meaningful little flower and we're just doing the most gorgeous little flower and we want to make it look very artful, we go splatter, splatter, splatter. Splattering on dry paper gives us that effect and that look. I'm going to use you guys to switch this out. We're good, good, good. We're doing great. You guys doing great? Is that just ox gall and water? Is that just water or ox gall and water? Okay, on my paint, it's just water, but the ox gall or the synthetic ox gall is inside the paint. It's the core watercolor and it has the synthetic ox gall in the paint. If I wanted that effect and I didn't have the core, I would put this product in the water as directed. If you want to use a natural one, you would get like one that's like this, not synthetic, but the real deal. So, okay. All right. So we're doing good. Is honey prepared if it gets like that? Okay.
All right.
Okay. So the next one is going to be splattered on to dry. I'm going to use my resist so I can get that. And we're going to do 2 ways. We've got the brush, the toothbrush, so we'll do some toothbrush since we know what that is, right? That's one way that we would splatter. The other way that we like to splatter, and I'll do it in some pink so you can see the difference, is we load up a brush and tap. 2 ways that we do that splatter. A toothbrush or a flicking object, a brush where you tap it. You load it wet and you tap it. That's going to have a little dry.
That's pretty
for a
straightforward.
second, huh?
That's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. Now, this is an interesting one, and I'm going to get this out. And this is one that you kind of want to know. I've taught this on my acrylic channel and in Life Book, and I think it's a really important one to have kind of an awareness on because it's such an awesome, unique result. So I'm going to take some blue. So you can just really, really, really see it. And the paper needs to be wet for this to work. Not like soaked, but wet. And I'm just giving you variance in the color so you can see how it looks in different areas against different colors. This is fluid white acrylic. You can technically do this with gouache. I think it works better with this. And we're going to splatter on, I'm going to put it here on my palette over here and put it out. It's golden titanium white fluid acrylic. That's the one I recommend. You can use other brands. You can use craft paint. I'm going to get my brush clean. I'm going to load it up. This is my toothbrush. All right, I'm going to come here and I'm going to splatter the acrylic into the wet watercolor. And what you'll see is those splatters soften and diffuse. Amazing for winter scenes. It's just incredible. And it continues to soften and bleed and diffuse in. It's like the best. I'm going to dry this real quick. Well, I think I can. We kind of know what the deal is. I'll dry the next one because we want it over dry. So I'm going to make a drawdown.
A drawdown?
Yeah, well, not a drawdown. We're going to make a gradated glaze. You know how so like you're painting some galaxies like you do? Right? And you got to get some stars on them.
All right, I'm with you. So like you just decided you're going to paint the new starship, the USS Stargazer?
Yeah. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create whatever your starry galactic sky is. I'm coming back with some Payne's Gray at the top to make it seem darker.
NCC Stargazer. Sorry.
Right, so it's dark at the top and a little bit lighter at the bottom. Let me dry this with a hair dryer, and then I'll show you how different it is when you do it over
Dry?
Dry.
Oh, so I will give you the Splatter Acrylic Dry. So, yeah. Can she do... Does acrylic, it doesn't diffuse as well, right? Yeah, so in acrylics, no, it doesn't diffuse nearly as well. It doesn't do that technique because there's not as much water to soften it, quite literally. So it's just a different technique that's used here. So,
all right.
There you go.
Same brush, clean. I don't want too much water, and I'm going to come here and work it through the bristles. And that's how you get stars. Different look. This wet, this dry. Different look. Not the same. Okay. So that was acrylic on wet, acrylic on dry. Crayon resist. All right. I'm going to use a clear wax crayon. You can use any crayons. And I'm going to make Twombly loops. Twombly little loops. My least favorite artist in the universe. Twombly loops.
Well, why couldn't these be 3-year-old loops then?
Same.
You know.
Same. No difference.
But at least this is more accurate.
My 3-year-old has more heart. Anyhow, no, I don't have feelings on this issue at all. Sometimes as artists, we have feelings. And that's a thing that happens.
The feels happen.
Yeah, the feels happen. So I'm going to get my brush wet. Let's grab some red because I think that's going to show it nicely. And what happens is the wax prevents the watercolor from getting to the paper.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Works in crayons, works in oil pastels, works with this clear resist, works across all those things beautifully. Now, the big one.
What's that?
You guys ready? Frisket.
Ooh.
Frisket. So, liquid masking agent. Very important thing in watercolor. I like the Incredible White Mask. I like the Incredible White Mask because it's easiest on my brushes. I can dry it with a hair dryer, and I don't have some weird, insane countdown clock of get it on, get it off that many other liquid masking agents have. I don't know anyone at the company. I'm not even friends over here. I just have this strong opinion. So I'm going to put out my list. I don't ever work from the bottle, and you don't shake the bottle, right? I'm going to pour a little bit off to the side.
Don't shake the bottle.
Don't shake the bottle. You'll get air bubbles in the bottle. I have a dedicated brush for my masking liquid, though with this you get much less. And I have a little water with Dawn soap. Warm is better. This protects your brushes. I'm going to put a little of the Frisket masking agent on my brush, and I'm going to paint whatever it is that I want to stay white paper. Now, I could have done color on here and then wanted to do a wash over it, and that would work as well.
Could you have painted the cat, then frisketed the cat?
Yes, that's what I mean. I could have painted the cat and then frisketed the cat, and with this Frisket, removed it without removing the paper. Here are the rules of Frisket. It goes on dry, it comes off dry. You cannot put it on when the paper is wet because it'll sink down into the fibers of the paper and tear the paper. You cannot remove it when the paper is wet for the same reason. And I forgot that rule once, or I thought I could rush it, and I wasn't using this Frisket because I hadn't found it yet. And, it ruined a whole video. Except we all learned about Friskets. That was fine. I'm just putting little shapes out that I was planning to have. You can remove this with a rubber cement picker-upper.
Oh.
Or with your finger. Or just a regular eraser.
Ashley just told me a good thing that I'm going to store for later.
Okay.
Strathmore and Canson make a great watercolor journal as well as with a spiral bound
Mute me while you're saying that to everyone so I can dry.
Yeah, so along with the spiral bound part, instead of just instead of having the split kind so that it comes apart. Yeah, I like the spiral bound kinds because you can flip them open and lay them flat. That's generally pretty good. I like those, so they don't. And look, she's just drying the frisket on the cat, and that's so that she can paint it and then pick it up and then do that stuff. And it has to be fully dried for the frisket to work, to be frisketable. Otherwise, it's just mushy all over the place. It doesn't, so it has to get dry.
Yeah, it has to get all the way dry. In fact, we're going to let this dry for a second. We're going to come back and visit our frisket again in a minute.
We'll come back to the frisket.
Yeah. Tape! We can do right now.
Sure.
Tape, tape, tape. So this is washi tape. I like washi tape. And here's some thin tape. Oh, let's do this one because this one says, don't forget, and then it's got arrows. So that seems like very good. So let's put out a little bit of tape. What you want is a low-tack tape. Washi tape often is a low-tack tape because it's used in paper crafting. They also make artist tape in every size. It's a little pricier. Let's put out some tape. Now, tape is great if you need straight lines. It's nice for abstracts, right? If you need consistent lines, like say in a shutter, or something that's like leaving a pattern. So say if something left like slat reflections in the ground with shadows, tape is a great option to go. There's a lot of times to use it. And again, I like the washi tape. Get the ends going here. This is, I think, Recollections. I think it's Recollections. John got the tape for me. So I can just put some here. We're just putting it around in an interesting way. Not like supremely interesting, but interesting. I'm going to burnish it with my finger. That is the big thing. And then you pull the tape off in the opposite direction that you put it down. Other thing you might not know.
You can remember all that? You just sort of...
Did I not? Oh, on these? No, I don't know. This is heavy full.
Sorry.
Okay.
I overwatered.
It's all right.
Pour it in your wastewater bin.
Okay. I'm going to grab some blue here.
Ooh.
I'm going to go right over. Let's maybe do a little cloud resist there. A little pattern. All right, we can come through and I just want you to understand why tape is an interesting animal in the world of techniques.
In that world.
All right. Now, just real quick, I'm going to hit it with the hairdryer just so you can see it,
okay,
what it does when it comes off.
Just a little drying there. Making sure it's... And that's one of the things on these techniques is a lot of times they take layering. So you may have to do wet into wet, and then wet onto dry, then dry onto wet. You just got to stack. Ooh. Technique stacking.
Top layer first.
Tape. It makes nice little dividey line. I think she's going over and checking the frisket again. You just checking your frisket?
Yeah, I think, man, we're pushing it, but I think I can put some paint down. Let's just hope.
Well, do you want to go on to do the line and washing and then come back to the frisket?
Yeah, that might actually work.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, so line and wash is you can do line and wash with pencil. You can do line and wash with waterproof ink. You can line and wash before you paint or line and wash after you paint. I like to line and wash before. So I've got a little bird kind of in here in pencil, so we'll put this in.
That's the word.
Yeah, it is. Right. And with this, you can do little details in your pen that really can help your drawing.
That's a bird.
That's a bird, right? What's interesting is once I paint this bird, I don't have to worry that much about where the paint is going because the structural lines are here.
Then it can be loose color on the bird.
Very loose color on the bird. Loose color just overall. You can paint super loosely and still have a very tight and orderly
See,
piece.
I used to think that watercolors just didn't know how to stay inside the lines
Mm-hmm.
because they'd like, I'm going to paint this house, but then I'm going to paint all outside the lines just because it doesn't matter if the color's here or there or everywhere. But
Sometimes it just doesn't matter.
it just doesn't. It's just you're just implying the feeling of the color, and that's sometimes the most important part.
Sometimes it's the only part. And it lets me paint in a very kind of expressive and loose manner.
Oops, sorry.
You know, I can come in and just work out my little bird. And get a really cute little painting in that's very loose, very expressive, very playful, but you're still super seeing what it is. All right, now the next one is the hardest one. I think this is dry enough maybe now to wash, so I'll do that real quick.
You want to go back and just do a real quick on that frisket?
Yeah, I'm going to come back and do a quick wash on the frisket. Not too much water. I don't want that much water. I just want you to be able to see. And we're going to let that dry a little more for a second. And come over here and I'm going to show you, and this is the most complicated technique of the techniques I'm demonstrating today, and the most advanced is the Grisaille. So I'm going to take some ink. This is waterproof ink. I like the Higgins Black Magic. Grisaille is tend to be done in acrylic and oils. It is a black and white study that is painted first, allowed to dry, and then you paint color over it in a glazing fashion. It is best to do this, I think, with permanent inks. That's the most forgiving. You can probably get away with pencil as well. So I'm going to do a little kind of grayscale, quick study. What I'm doing is I'm making sure I've got little washes that are not completely dark. I'm using my paper and different things to control how much like water is coming out.
Oh, wow.
All right, so I'm just using this to kind of control that. Come in and even tap out. Right, and the reason that I like to use a product that's a permanent ink is that later when I come in with the watercolor, it's not going to move anywhere. Let's put a little shadow under the eye, so important as we know. Higgins Black Magic ink is what we're using right now. Until it dries, I can lift it and move it. Once it's dry, it's pretty much, dry.
It's just there.
It's going to just be there. Yeah, I know. It's cool. I hear you oohs and ahs from TV Land.
It's really cool.
When you understand the principles of things, the whole world is your playground. All right, we're going to let that have a bit of a dry. There's not a dry on that. Well, maybe. Do we want lashes? I don't know if we want lashes. Maybe, because everybody just feels like lashes are those most challenging ones. So I'll just put out some lashes. There you go. We've got lashes. It's a very nice little grayscale study. Yeah, that's what I can do in a few minutes. Let's see if we can remove the frisket and see the effect. Fingers crossed.
See how this goes. Whoop. And so this will be the Frisket, not brisket, the Frisket finale. But, you know, if you've been hearing brisket when I say frisket, then after this, you're heading to the barbecue joint. Up here in Pennsylvania, those are few and far between. Down in Houston, they were almost on every block.
Now, theoretically, I'm going to start lifting up with maybe my finger. I also save the boogers from inside the cap. They're pretty good at removing. Rubber cement picker uppers, which comes in the set. I just didn't find mine before the show.
Oh, there it goes. It does pick
It just
right up.
holds out. What I painted the frisket on stays white. You can see everywhere I didn't have frisket, there's a little bit of color.
That's awesome.
I think it's easier to pick it up with the rubber cement picker upper, but
your fingers did pretty good there.
My fingers did. If you have liquid latex allergies, now the Incredible White Mask doesn't give me that, but they also make a latex-free version if your allergy is quite serious. So that's pretty amazing as well for those of you who have to worry about that.
Wow. That was it. That was Frisket.
Nope.
No,
that was Frisket. Yes, that was Frisket.
That was Frisket.
Go back in real quick.
Now you're going to finish the Grisaille?
Yeah, I'm going to finish the Grisaille and just kind of let you guys see the salt.
Oh, they wanted to...
Salt comes off. You just dust it off when it's all done, and that's the impact. Rice.
And then you have...
That's rice.
Where's the...
Salt. Rice. Salt.
Now show me the Saran wrap.
Oh, we did the Saran wrap earlier.
Yeah. Oh, they just want to see it real quick?
Okay. Saran wrap.
Ah. Okay,
rice,
that's good.
Salt. The issue with the salt is it will always have a little bit of on it.
Yeah.
So you're going to feel roughness on there. You won't with the rice. Difference between the techniques. All right, let's get a watercolor brush. Get some water on there. And let's give her some, I guess, green eye today.
Okay.
And I can come over the skin with a little bit of a skin tone. And I'm glazing. See how I'm glazing?
I do.
And I get wonderful, amazing color, but I don't have to worry because the black and white part of the study is here, giving me the value. All I'm applying is the color. Yeah, I know. It's just the bomb diggity, right?
Kind of cool.
It's super cool. And we all know that, eyes aren't ever really kind of white on the inside, so I can come in and then a little bit. Look at that.
Oh.
Grisaille. I taught it. Not just taught it, but in a 32 technique video. That's what they mean when they say it. Works in oil, works in acrylic, also works in watercolor. So, 32 techniques, my friends. We did 32. We did all we did washes, glazes, wet into wet, wet on water, wet onto dry, erase, blend. We did glazing, dry brushing, sponging. We did misting. We did wet touching. We did Q-tips, pouncers, cellophane, alcohol drops, paper towel clouds, palette knife, salt, rice, using a straw, using drips, splattering onto a wet surface with watercolor. Then we did splattering onto a dry surface with watercolor, splattering onto a wet surface with acrylic, splatting onto a dry surface with acrylic. We did a wax resist, which works with your clear crayons, your regular crayons, your oil pastels. We did Frisket, tape, line and wash, and Grisaille. Boom! That's how the Sherpa do.
Yep.
32.
32.
Techniques. For real. Oh my gosh. So we do have to grab the kid, I think.
Yep.
Michael Art, I appreciate you too. Lindsay, I appreciate you. Every single member of my community, I appreciate you. You guys now are caught up on pretty much all the core techniques you need as a watercolor artist, so you can show up for all the stuff I'm going to be doing with like absolute confidence. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.